Welcome to Build Your Foundation, our weekly dive into a topic regarding divorce, mediation, finance, or mental health. So, for today, we're continuing our divorce coach series on Build Your Foundation, and we have a very special guest, Jackie Miller of Jackie Miller Coaching. Jackie is based out of Manhattan Beach, California, and specializes in high conflict and narcissistic personalities. Jackie, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for having me.
So, to start off, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Well, I myself went through a very high conflict divorce,
Mm,
and it took a few years, was very expensive and extremely stressful. And at the end of that, I basically decided that I had to do anything to help people going through
mm,
this.
mhm.
And I discovered that there was such a thing as a divorce coach. So I decided to not only get my divorce coach certification, but an additional certification that is specific to high conflict. And that is where I concentrate all of my efforts.
Got it. So, how do you help a client who is thinking about in the process of or just having gone through a divorce?
Good question, because I do have clients in all of those phases. And really, regardless of what phase you're in, it's a very big, scary life decision, or there are major decisions happening all
Yeah.
along the way.
Mm,
And so, what I find is because there's so much fear involved
mm,
in the whole process, that I really work with my clients on, first of all, what they want.
mhm.
Very often, I ask, and they're not sure.
Yeah.
And so we really have to talk through that, whether it's, like I said, trying to make the decision,
Yeah.
if divorce is the right path for them, or many decisions that happen during the divorce, or what do I do
Mhm.
after?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so many unknowns and just stressful situations that come up. And fear really puts us in that fight or flight where we can't think through it. And that's why it's so important to have a thinking partner, or someone to bounce things off of, or
Mhm.
brainstorm with, or that's been through it, and or can just sort of guide you along the way. So we really break down those fears into very bite-sized pieces.
Mhm.
And we put some action items around them. We put some, just very small, digestible goals.
Awesome.
And that's the only way you can really make a decision or get through a hard time, because otherwise that big unknown just leaves you stuck in imagining the worst.
Yeah. In my practice as well as a mediator, when I do consultations, that's exactly what I ask my clients. What do you want? And it's true. Most of them do not know exactly what they want. And
Right,
the next step for me is, okay, do we need a therapist or do we need a divorce coach? Right?
right, right,
Because once they're clear, then they can make the steps and they can make the decisions to take the next steps.
right.
Whether it's, we need to go into couples counseling or no, this isn't going to work. No matter which way or another I divide or try to figure out a solution, the marriage is done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know you feel the same way, but because none of us are pro divorce,
Yeah.
right? And so if things can be worked out, that's awesome.
Of
But we're
course.
here in
Yeah.
case that's not the path that it takes. But yeah, but you're right. It's a scary situation to be in, and you really
Yeah.
need a team around you that can get you through the
Most definitely.
process.
Yeah. So share with us, say, the most difficult client scenario and how your role as a divorce coach helped this person or people.
Okay. I would have to say, Caroline, the most difficult really was around a custody case,
Mm.
and it was where a client had lost custody of their children.
Oh,
Um, so right off the bat, you can tell that's a painful,
yeah.
heartache situation. I think, though, that aside from the obvious of trying to get, some custody of the children back, the most difficult part of it was the mindset, because again, a lot of fear came in.
Mm.
Worst case scenario, what if I never get my children back? And so there was a lot of work done around not only strategy, communication, making sure this person was presenting the best way they could to all the people that came into their sphere that were making decisions on their custody, but it was how to keep the hope alive. How
Mm,
do you get out of bed the next day and keep the
yeah.
fight going? How do we break the fear down into bite-sized pieces? And the reality that it is not a quick process. It's
No.
a
Oh,
long process. And that honestly, that example right there is why I got into this line of work, because there were so many times I was in the fetal position and it was a Friday at 8 p.m. and I didn't really have a question for my attorney. And it wasn't really a therapy trauma question. It was, I had no hope.
oh,
And who do you call? And that's your coach. You call your divorce coach.
oh,
you know,
no, excellent.
yeah, and because you do have to have somebody there that just say, "Just tell me this isn't gonna be the worst,
Mhm.
case scenario. Please tell me," and so we talk through it, and
Chuck,
it's
I'm a huge proponent of divorce coaches, and you know already that you've worked with my clients, so you already know I firmly believe in having a divorce coach. You know, one of the things that I always remind my clients is even in the most amicable of divorce scenarios and mediation, it's still tough.
yeah,
There are days when it's a marathon and you just want to be in the fetal position and call it done.
absolutely.
And, I try to work with my clients to say, look, if you talk to a divorce coach, they may be able to help you give steps.
Yeah.
So, what are some ways that you can try to help them build some hope?
Well, I think that the first thing is we have to sort of assess where they're at, because there's so many moving parts, right? And it is such a major life event. Your ex, soon to be ex, may be at a totally different stage than you. So we really have to talk
Mm,
through, are you the one that's kind of been on your way out for a while and you're sort of waiting for your ex to get up to speed
yeah.
emotionally, or you're the one that's being left behind and you're in devastation mode?
Mm,
And so it's really assessing where you're at. And then what are your needs? Because you're right, a therapist is super important. And I'm glad you brought that up, because people sometimes say, well, what's the difference? Well, I say, I am all things divorce. I needed a therapist. I always set people up with a therapist. They help you with the trauma, with the
mhm.
loss, the, past
Past
experiences.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I am here to get you through the divorce, break down the next steps. And again, as long as you have goals, even if they're little tiny ones, you get up the
Mm,
next day, you focus on what that goal is, what that plan is for the day. You you inch yourself forward,
yeah.
and then you have a plan for the next day. And that's just we just take it one day at a time.
I love it. So I know that you focused, on or you're certified in high conflict narcissistic divorces. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it is a completely different animal,
Mhm.
than just I hate to say your garden variety divorce, because that's just, it's hard to just say that. But as you know, because you mediate divorces that are not necessarily, you can't really, it's hard to mediate in divorces that are super high conflict,
Yeah.
right? They're a different animal because there's usually one party, and that's why when you mention the narcissistic personality disorder, there's usually a disordered party who is very high conflict or toxic, that's not rational. And so you can't mediate because there's no rational thinking happening.
Yeah.
And so I'm representing the person who's on the receiving end of that toxic,
Mm,
scorch the earth, take
yeah.
everybody down with them
Mm,
mentality. And what you have to do in these situations is think extremely strategically. A lot of what I do is sitting down and being strategic. And that actually even feeds into to your emotions, because you have to watch how you're communicating. If you have a person that's just waiting for you to make the smallest mistake, you have to cross your T's, dot your I's. So we look at your texts, we look at your emails, we look at strategically, proactively communicating. If it's a custody situation, we well, really any situation, but we learn how to document so that it's in a format that your attorney, can use it, and that your time
mhm.
with your attorney is efficient. It's how do you present in front of a custody evaluator, a psych evaluator, your judge, your own attorney, even, so that you don't come off looking like the crazy disordered one, because that other person is doing everything they can
Doing everything to
to make you
push
look
the
bad.
buttons,
Yeah, and you have
right?
to know how the family law system works, which is not a fun place to be.
No.
Family law is, it's just, you need somebody who's can tell you, like, don't use that word in court. Like, really,
Mm.
there's a word I shouldn't use. There's a few words you should never say, or,
What are some of those words for our
okay,
audience?
well, so for instance, and this may sound basic, but people do it all the time. Never say my children, or I'm dropping off my kid, or my ours. It's always
Always
ours.
ours.
And I'll tell you why. Even if that other person never lifts a finger, never does anything, never shows up for custody time, never
Mm.
does anything, the court is always watching for anyone to not be cooperative, and they don't like it. So it can be the smallest thing as you always texting, emailing, verbally saying our children. It's also another thing, never say visitation. Never said, well, he was having his visitation.
Okay.
Say his parenting time. It makes it sound like you're up on your hill, you own the children, and you're allowing him or her to visit. I know, but those are small changes that we make to make
I-
sure that you're always
yeah.
seen as the cooperative one.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And there are many more, but yeah, that's just that. Those are a couple.
Wow. So turning the page a little bit, tell us a little bit about your most favorite client scenario and what the impact was for them and then also for you.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. This one I did have a lot of fun with
Mhm.
because I keep mentioning strategy.
Yeah.
One of the things I love to do with my clients is we profile their ex. We literally spend a day. I have a whole workbook that I give them that I put together. We go through their mom, their dad, they grew up, their trauma, their all kinds of
Okay.
stuff. And what we're looking for is their triggers, so that we can predict how they're going to act when they get
Yeah.
news. We can nuance and finesse your communications to them to keep them calm, to
Woo.
get what you want. And so I was doing this with a client once, and it was 4 years post divorce, and they were back in a custody situation. And we started talking through the actual divorce 4 years prior. And she started to describe, just as a side, it was not even part of the story, to be honest with you, profile. Just as a side, she went off on this tangent and told me this story about when the house finally settled and she ended up buying the house and da da da. And, and she said, and so he finally gave up and da da. And I said, wait, he gave up. Why'd he give up?
Mm.
She said, oh, well, we realized, or we had sent this, my attorney sent this letter over, and it was very like technical, outlining all of the legal stuff, all of the codes, all of the, documenting like all of the finances, he got so overwhelmed. He was like, fine, threw up his arms and whatever, and gave in. And I said, oh my gosh, this is huge. This is what we're going to do. And it was a custody. I have to tell you, Caroline, she went to her attorney, and it's one situation where the attorney, they have me in on the calls,
Yeah.
and we presented this. And so the next letter they drafted to his attorney was very, it was all factual. Of course, it wasn't threats. It wasn't anything like that, but it was very factual. This is what's going to happen if we go down that path. This is the amount. These are according to this code, this law, this is the history. We've documented this. Because sometimes you want to actually keep those things undercover. You want to save
It's
your
part of the
ammo.
strategy.
Sometimes you want to save your ammo. This was not that situation. Blast him with it.
They're like, boom.
Threw up his hands. It took about 3 communications,
Yeah.
signed off on everything. And now that part's done. And there's a second part with some college money. We also decided to separate the two,
Yeah.
just bombard him with this, signed off. And then now going back, literally today, we had a phone call around the college money thing,
Yeah.
using the same strategy. But
Wow.
you have to spend few hours talking with somebody through this,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because she just, it wasn't, why would she ever think about the house? She's doing custody. That
Yeah.
was 4 years ago,
Yeah.
so that
That's
was my favorite, because I was like, oh,
well, because you are helping your client. The skills and the tools that you are imparting to your client is helping them in their divorce proceedings.
mhm,
That we're advocating
right.
for those who need it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and I want to throw in just sort of a disclaimer that if it sounds like I'm after someone to take their
Yeah.
kids or after someone to take
No.
it, I'm always working with the client
Yeah.
who has given up a lot, never raised their voice, put up with a lot, watched the kids suffer because the parent hasn't shown up, hasn't been there for them, and so we're just going back in to get things settled usually.
Scenarios where, the client may have been in an emotionally, mentally, possibly even a physically abusive scenario for years. It's
Yeah,
not you're not just going to go and stick it to somebody
no,
you know,
no,
for the
no.
sake of sticking
I'm
it.
the opposite mentality. Right, right.
Exactly, exactly. As you mentioned, it's not that we are pro divorce. It's just that it happens, and how do we help our clients
Yeah,
through the situations?
it happens. So let's make it the best,
Yeah.
best as we can make it.
So one more question I totally forgot to ask you about it earlier was, or mention it earlier, is you have a podcast.
Yes.
Tell me about your podcast.
Okay, my podcast is called Out of Crazy Town, Your Guide to Divorcing a Narcissist.
Mhm.
Um, and on that podcast, I interview attorneys, financial people, therapists. I have survivors on there that just
Wow.
come on and tell their story. A couple of them are anonymous.
Yeah.
Um, a couple of others aren't. So I have a retired judge on there that has done mediation for high conflict. I
Mhm.
have so sort of anything I can do. In fact, one of my recent podcasts also was a parent that went through high conflict who ended up developing a co-parenting app
Mhm.
based on her
Wow.
experience. So anything I can throw out there that might help people,
Yeah.
those are I have those on my podcast.
I love it. I love it. So are you on Apple Podcasts? What are the
Yes,
different?
Spotify, Apple, Google are the 3 big ones.
Okay.
It's hosted by podbean.com, but, Apple, Google,
Got
Spotify
it.
are pretty
Got
much
it.
the big ones, yeah.
Awesome. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
I would just say get yourself all the support you need. This is the time, if you're listening to this because you are going through a divorce, this is the time to ask for help, whether it's from friends or relatives, or go get this extra support if you're just learning about divorce coaches. I'm at JackieMillerCoaching.com. I have 30-minute free discovery sessions where you just tell me what's going on. I tell you if I think I can help. And if you think that my services are valuable, we can work together. And there are other high conflict divorce coaches out there too. And you know, um, also a CDFA, which I know you are, Caroline. I always recommend CDFAs to my clients to get through the financial stuff. You have to understand that with a professional.
You know what?
So
Most people don't recognize that yet. And I feel
yeah,
like I'm one of those, blowhorns that are trying to get the word out there that
yeah,
when you're getting through divorce, it's not just splitting it half, 50-50, every single
right.
account. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it.
Well, I have to say, and just like you said, do you think divorce coaching is so valuable? My divorce had a very financial personality, I call it, to it.
Mhm.
And I didn't know you at the time, but my CDFA ended up being the absolute star in my divorce. She saved me. So you don't have to ask me
Yeah.
twice how I feel about him.
Well, Jackie, thank you again so much for joining us on Build Your Foundation. Um, Besides your email, where else can our clients find you on social?
I am on Instagram at @jmillercoach. You can also go to @out of crazy town, and that will take
Mm,
you to my podcast Instagram. Go to Jackie Miller Coaching on LinkedIn, Jackie Miller Coaching on Facebook, and you can find me in all of those places.
perfect. So, audience, if you are considering separation, divorce, or have any questions on what we talked about today, please reach out to us at Foundations Divorce Solutions and schedule a free consultation. Or if you would like to connect with Jackie, contact us. I will get you guys connected. So, link and contact info are in the bio. And even if you're not in the state of Washington or in the Seattle area, as you can tell, Jackie's in Manhattan Beach, California. Please contact us. We do work with colleagues across the U.S. who may be able to help you. And also, please share this post or tag someone if this speaks to you personally or if it may benefit someone else. And lastly, If there is a topic that you would like for us to discuss on a future episode, please DM us. Thanks so much and take care.
Thanks, Caroline.